All right, well, without further ado, we can get into our questions. Now, Tom, you said something, and this really leads in very nicely to one of Ash's questions he posted about playing the cards you've been dealt, right? His question, I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it, was pretty long, but to paraphrase it, he was saying it seems like some people have it easier than others, right? They're good looking, they're tall, they're born rich, and some people seem to have some very poor cards dealt to them, whether they have a handicap or they're the wrong color in that particular culture. Now, is it really easier to lower your entropy in either of these situations? He's wondering. It doesn't seem fair to Ash. What would you have to say on that?
That sense of fairness is your ego, Ash. Yes, you have to deal with what you've got. You have to deal with who you are. Now, if it's things you can easily change, like you'd rather live in a different neighborhood, well, maybe you can change that. Maybe you can't. If you can't change that because all the other neighborhoods cost too much, well, then you have to realize you're going to stay where you are, or you have to make plans for getting a better job, you know, that sort of thing. So you have to deal with what you have. You're here to make choices, deal with things. Remember, this is the way life works. Stuff happens and you get to deal with it. That's life. And by the choices, by the way you deal with it, you evolve or de-evolve. That's the whole thing. So it's it's not that some people have it easier than others. Everybody has their own challenges to deal with. You'll have a set of challenges. And if you happen to be born with one arm and one leg, well, then you have a different set of challenges than other people. But you deal with those challenges. You make the best of it. You do what you can do. You develop what you can develop. And the alternative to that is to sit around and feel sorry for yourself. And then you don't develop much of anything. So instead of feeling it's not fair, which is kind of feeling sorry for yourself, you need to say, here's where I am, whatever my situation is, what other skills I have, whatever advantages or disadvantages I have. Now, what am I going to do about it? What choices do I have to make? And make the best choices. So there is no situation where you can't evolve the quality of your consciousness. There's always choices that you have. You do the best you can with what you've got. So if you think you've got a particularly dealt a bad hand, well, just think of it as a little more challenging hand. And the easier the lesson, usually the less you learn. The more challenging the lesson, well, the more potential there is there to learn something important. So maybe with all those challenges, Ash, you're advantaged because you've got all these tough challenges that will enable you to grow a whole lot if you deal with them well. So you have to turn that around and see it the other way around. Oh, I got a lot of tough challenges. That's an opportunity to really grow. Now, well, what are my low entropy choices? What are my caring and loving choices? What are my positive choices? And then go do that, and you'll make more progress. If you were born wealthy with a silver spoon in your mouth and everything you wanted was given to you the moment you wanted it, that may be a really tough growth path. It may be really difficult because it's hard to find challenges. Everything's handed to you that you want. What would be your challenges? Your challenge would mainly be to grow up in spite of having all that stuff. Your challenges would be to go join the Peace Corps and go to a jungle someplace and be helpful to someone. It'd be those kinds of things. So everybody's challenged. Everybody has things they have to do that are difficult. So, suck it up, cupcake, and look around and see what your choices are, and start working on it. It's that sort of thing. The worst thing that can happen is to start saying, "Oh, it's unfair," "Oh, my stuff's so hard and other people are so easy." That will kill your ability to go do what you have to do. It's that kind of self-pity that robs you of the energy and of the focus and vision that you need to do the things you want to do. So let that sort of nonsense go. Look at it squarely and say, all right, I got some challenges here now. How am I going to deal with them? What's the best, most positive way to deal with these? And then start at it.
I wanted to move next to Dorothea's. I hope I'm saying that right. Dorothea's question. Um, this one is about the rule set, the actual rule set of this virtual reality, and then how much can be bent, how much breaking of the rule set can you do, whether it be from your own personal belief and conviction or the pervading cultural beliefs of the times. And, what even does the LCS have to do with it? Does the LCS play a role as well in our little realities rule set?
Okay, well, I will ask Dorothea to be a little more specific in the situation, because that's such a broad question.
Yes,
It's hard
yes,
to answer it.
I can understand it. I'll try to describe a little bit better with some examples. Around 1947, a man named Mirin Dajo attracted worldwide attention with a demonstration of how he pierced the fluoride through his body without being seriously injured. According to him, he was absolutely convinced that he could not be hurt, and this was his explanation why he wasn't hurt. And there are also numerous reports of children who did not know that body parts do not grow back. And so the avatar grew back, perhaps a finger or something else, for example. Or another example is placebos. Even traditional medicine now recommends that doctors use the placebo effect on patients today. So my question is, what is really possible if I really, really, really believe, or if I do not know that a finger does not grow back? What would be possible? Or are all these actions made from the LCS?
Okay, now I understand the question real well. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can make changes by modifying future probability. Okay, that's the mechanism. So if your intent is that the finger grow back, well, that will increase the probability that will happen. But now, what is the probability of that happening? You see, if the probability is 1 in 100 million that happens, now you have to reduce that probability all the way from 1 in 100 million down to something like maybe 1 in 10, or something that's more likely to happen. And that's very hard to do. You have to move it a lot of distance. So in general, the things that we're able to do are things where the probability has enough uncertainty in it. There's enough uncertainty that we can modify the outcome with our intent. Now, everybody's intent isn't equal. You can have a stronger intent just by focusing, having all your energy, put into one thing, having your mind very clear and very stable. And, there are things that make your intent more powerful or less powerful. But then you have to look at the uncertainty. Now, making a finger grow back, there's a huge amount of probability that says that won't happen. we don't do that. Our bodies don't support that sort of thing. So at that point, the thing that would make that happen would be the LCS. And the LCS would step in and say, well, I'll make that finger grow back, because the LCS can basically do what it wants in a virtual reality like this. It's rendering the virtual reality. It can render it however it wishes. So the LCS can make that kind of a change. Now, if the child expects it to grow back, that would help some. That would certainly lower that, that probability would be, more and more favorable because of that. And if everybody else around it, the parents and the friends and so on, also expect it to grow back, that would lower it even more. But something that is that unlikely would probably take the LCS to actually change it. And why would it do that? Well, it does a lot of things. A lot of its interactions with people are just to help people open their minds, just to let people know that life is not just this material world that follows these material rules. That sometimes, miracles happen, magic happens, crack the door open a little bit on the possibilities that we have here. Have a little broader view of the possibilities of reality. So it just kind of helps people break out of their rut in their minds that, oh, that's impossible. Well, generally it is, but sometimes some strange things happen. Now, the guy who ran swords through himself and did things like that, I saw some pictures of that. Old pictures, old black and white movies of him doing that. And of course, in that case, it was probably just his own intent. His own intent was evidently strong enough. He probably could focus well, had a strong intention, and he had the intention that he wouldn't get hurt. Okay, so he didn't, because what actually happened inside of him, what organs were affected and which ones not, and all the rest of that, well, it's unknown. There wasn't any x-ray on him while he was doing that sort of stuff to look at what was going on inside. And if he had an intent that it wasn't going to hurt him, then the probability that it would puncture something that would be fatal goes down less and less. And it probably just kind of worked its way between, rolls and rolls of his maybe intestines or other things. And it tended to do that because it's unknown. So a lot of uncertainty there is how that might go through. So if you have a lot of uncertainty, then he could affect that uncertainty reasonably well. I think one of the things that did finally do him in was he swallowed a dagger. Isn't that right? He swallowed a knife of some sort, and that actually did him in. Probably because his certainty that it wouldn't hurt him probably got cracked somewhere, and he had a little worry that maybe this one would. I don't know. Or maybe he had done enough. He had already made his point that he could do these things, and keeping going was going too far. He didn't know when to quit. May have been a poor choice, to keep pushing it. But in any case, that would have probably been him, not the system that allowed that. But the system may have had, again, opening people's minds, may have had something to do with it. Often, I shouldn't say often, that's not true, but some of the times a person will have been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, given 3 months to live, and after the first week, they don't have cancer anymore. Now, it doesn't happen a lot, but it probably happens in almost every major city, probably, once or twice a year, where things like that, take place. So again, it's the body. It's the biology that we don't really understand, has so much uncertainty in it that those kinds of things can happen. So yes, we can modify future probability. We can do it better if we learn to focus our intent clearly. And if the larger conscious system would like to make us a little a showpiece about how reality is stranger than most people think, well, then we'll get a little help there. But that's not necessarily going to happen. You know, it only serves that purpose if it's something that happens rarely. If it happened all the time, then it wouldn't serve that purpose anymore. You know, it would be, well, people would expect it. But the people go, oh, really? Wow, stage 4, and then they got rid of it. You know, that's a miracle. Strange things can really happen. And it just opens the mind a bit that a lot of things happen that we don't understand because we don't really understand reality very well. And this materialism that we believe in that would say, no, it's just flat out impossible. Well, it's not always right because these things do happen. So they are possible. It's just no one can explain them. They're paradoxes. So yeah, it's some of both. It's some of the LCS, it's some of just people focusing, and it's some of how much uncertainty is involved in the process. You know, there are people who have only a centimeter or half a centimeter of brain tissue just lining their skull. And that's all the brains they have. They don't have the lobes that do vision or muscle coordination or audio. You know, all that stuff in the brain is missing. They had, I think it was some sort of encephalitis when they were, before they were born, and their head was full of fluid. So because their head was full of fluid, the brain never developed. So they've got this little bit of brain tissue just kind of lining the skull, and none of the things that would actually make sense as far as what they do. But nobody knew about it. Nobody knew that they had a brain full of water, and they grew up to be just fine. And you know, they go to graduate school in mathematics and get degrees. They do all sorts of things, and eventually they'll have an accident or something, and somebody will give them an MRI in their head, and it's like, what? You know, this person doesn't have a brain. How is that possible? But there are those things that happen. There's a guy who studied that, and there's dozens of such people that we know of, and all of the ones where the pediatrician in utero said, your baby's going to be born with encephalitis. Well, all of those end up mostly in institutions or whatever because they can't function, because they don't have a brain. The ones that go on and have normal lives are the ones that nobody knew that it was like that. So they just kept on keeping on, and the system made it happen. The LCS just made it happen. Probably made the accident happen where they had to get the CAT scan so that it would, the people would realize this as well. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but yes, miracles do happen in the sense that things that are highly improbable can happen, but the probabilities can't be 1 or 0. You know, if your probability is a 1 or a 0, then there is no uncertainty. It's got to be somewhere in between. And it's easier for us to do things that aren't so improbable.
Thank you very much. And it does answer my question. My only little bit question is, when you talk about the intent, how do I tell my intent? Is my intent the thoughts I have? Do I create with my thoughts my intent?
Yeah,
or how
thoughts.
does the intent? Yes.
Well,
Okay.
well, yeah, your thoughts, your intent is your thoughts. It's your mental, you can think of it as your mental energy, though energy is just a metaphor.
Mhm.
Um, it's the mental energy that you can put on something. Now, it's not a wish, throwing a penny in the wishing well and wishing for something. That doesn't have a lot of intensity to it. It doesn't have a lot of energy behind it. That's just a wish. So this is something that takes some time, usually some repetition. You have if you want to change the probability a lot, you have to do it again and again. You have to have a clear mind, which means your mind needs to not be flying around in different places, doing different things all the time, so that you can focus this intent and hold that intent there for some time, maybe at least 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You have to keep that intent very focused without thoughts coming in. Typical thoughts that come in is, am I doing this right? Am I being effective? I wonder if I'm actually, this is if I'm going to be effective here. Is this working, or am I doing it right? That's your intellect coming in and bothering you. Well, that will nullify it. That will get in the way. So it has to be something you just do from the being level. But yes, it's your mental energy, your thought. And if you have negative energy around it at the same time, like, well, I hope this works, but it probably won't. But I'm going to try it anyway, but it probably really won't work, but I'm going to try. Well, those negative ideas that probably won't work will defeat it, because they're also adding energy to it not working. So you have to really, put your effort in a positive way. Now that's what, in a religious context, that would be prayer. It's the same sort of thing. But what you're trying to do is important, and why you're trying to do it is important. So if you want to modify probability to puff your ego up, oh, I really want this, I want that, I need more money, I'd like a mink coat because that would make me look really snazzy. So I'm going to put my mental energy to doing that. Well, that's not really a good reason as far as the LCS goes. That's just feeding your ego and is unnecessary to your growth. So the LCS isn't going to support that with a lot of its own effort. Now you might still, raise the probability that you'll get your mink coat, but that's not something that you can, so what you want is not really that valuable. So that's part of the problem. So what you want, why you want to do it, how well focused you are, no negativity, that will give you a strong will.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, Tom, this connects really well with one of Guillaume's questions about binaural beats. He's been, if you haven't heard yet already, actually, Tom released a set of binaural beats this year, and I know a bunch of people have been trying them out. And Guillaume has some questions about perhaps customizing them and maybe adding some music on top of them. If you want to go any further, Guillaume, please go on ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you had some instruments to any binaural beats, not necessarily those of you, Toms, but if you had other tones like string quartets, some synthesizer, do you kind of interfere with that tool for the meditative state? That's my question. Do you think that
No,
it's kind of ruining the thing if
no,
you
it doesn't.
if
It doesn't
someone will
ruin
do
it.
that?
It doesn't ruin it, and it doesn't really interfere with it. It just makes it a little different. It depends on what you're doing with the binaural beat. Let's say you are just using that binaural beat to relax, or you're using it to solve a problem of, something that you need an intuitive solution. Then putting some kind of music or background to it that is pleasing to you, that is relaxing to you, and that generally puts you in a very positive frame of mind, could be helpful, not hurtful. So yes, if you put something that is helpful, then they work good together. So it doesn't ruin it. The binaural beat will still do what the binaural beat does. It's still there. It's still putting a tone here, a tone here. It's still mixing at the corpus callosum. It's still causing, the corpus callosum to go into the, that's just the mechanics of how it works, and it's going to work whether you have other sound in there or not. The fact that you may have, that you have other things going on, may make your mind, music tends to move your emotions easily. Music tends to be emotional in the way it affects people. So if what you're trying to do is relax and you have music that makes you want to get up and dance, well, those two would probably be working at odds with each other. One saying relax, the other one saying is get up and, put out some energy. So no, that probably would not be a good idea. But if you pick the right kind of music that is, that works along with whatever it is you're trying to do, then sure, that I know a lot of people who've done that.
And in term of in the mix, like if you kind of reduce the two tones that creating the binaural beats, if you lower it to like really lower the master of it, do you think that it will be also useful for staying in a meditative state?
Yeah, sure.
Or you have
It'll still,
to keep it kind of really loud in the mix?
no, you don't have to keep it loud. You can make it subtle. If you make it subtle, it'll still work. Now, will it work as well? Will it put you in that state and lock you there as strongly? Probably not, but that's not the point. The point is that you're making this cooperation between the music and the binaural beat. And to put the binaural beat in to where it's almost subliminal, where you can't really hear it. It's just in there, but it's just there, that if you know about and think about it, you can hear it, but otherwise you wouldn't notice it. It'll still do its thing. It'll still, create, brain entrainment to the theta state, just the same. But it won't necessarily do it as strongly if that was the only thing you were listening to. So it'll still have its effect. It may not be as strong effect or as immediate effect, but it'll still work. Doesn't have to be loud or dominant. But its effect will probably be more subtle. The effect won't be the sledgehammer effect. It'll be a more subtle effect.
Now, Guillaume, you had another question. Would you like to ask that as well while we're on you?
Yeah, sure. Quite simple question. You talk a bit with Caroline about the negative towards self. So my question is about that. I've been through a lot of negative self-talk those last years, and I'm kind of tired of it, of listening to that old tape and not feeling good about myself sometimes. And I want to ask, is that negative self-talk kind of useful? Is there a way to reduce considerably this flow of shitty self-talk? I kind of think that the more you meditate, the more you are aware of that kind of stream. And I just want to finish with saying sometimes I feel like I can't afford the luxury of a negative thought in the pursuit of happiness and lowering the entropy of my consciousness.
Well, having negative thoughts is no luxury. There is nothing good about that. There is no advantage to it, and it doesn't ever do any good. It's always negative. That is kind of the most self-defeating thing you can do, is to be constantly putting yourself down, having negative thoughts. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not, whatever, and you can always find things that you are not enough. And if you focus on that, then that will hold you down. That's like, trying to swim with a cement block, fastened to your back. It just is, makes everything else difficult. So that's the very worst thing that you can do, is have a negative stream going on about what you're doing and how you're doing it. Okay. It doesn't mean that you should never take a serious look at yourself. And sometimes there are negative things there, but you don't just keep iterating on them and iterating on them. You can look at yourself and say, well, okay, gee, if I want a better job, I'm probably going to need to go to school. I'm probably going to have to learn some new skills. All right, well, then make a plan and do it. So it's not that you can't be critical of yourself and come up with a plan, but to just say, oh, gee, I just can't seem to get a job that makes enough money. It's just so unfair, and I just can't seem to do it. And I've been trying and nothing works. And I guess I'm just not, good enough to, to get promoted. And just to keep going round and round on that is self-defeating, and is always a problem. So if anybody is stuck in a stream of negative things about themselves, that's probably your major problem, is that negative stream about yourself. If you could just stop that, everything else would probably work out just fine. Even if you didn't do anything else, if you could just stop that self, degradation, you would probably find life was a whole lot better. Everything would get better. Relationships would get better. Work would get better. You'd probably get that promotion. All sorts of things would happen. It's that self-negativity is very has very negative results on you and how you interact, on your relationships, on everything that you do. It's self-defeating. What it does is it raises the probability of failure. It raises the probability of things not going right. It raises the probability that you won't get that promotion. All those things that you say, it raises the probability that the negative things are true and the negative things won't happen. So it is self-defeating. So yes, getting in a loop of self-denigration is not healthy at any time. Sure, you can look at yourself and be critical about yourself, but don't just keep playing that tape over and over. If you're critical about yourself, well, either accept that or figure out what you're going to do about it. Fix it. It's just going round and round and round about how things aren't working. That itself might be the reason why things aren't working.
I guess it's clear that it's not useful, but now how can I fix that, Tom?
It's not useful. That's an understatement. You have to fix it by by having a very strong will to not do it. So as soon as you hear yourself going through the negative things and berating yourself, just stop. Say, "Oop, there I go again." Stop and think of some positive things. Think of some positive things that are, that are good. Think about the people who care about you. Think about just anything that's positive. It's wintertime and you're warm. Think about all the positive things going on in your life and feel good about that. And just stop yourself whenever you catch yourself in a negative feedback. If you're constantly giving yourself negative feedback, say, "Oh, stop. I'm making all this stuff come true." So start thinking positive thoughts. Counteract it with positive thoughts, and positive things about your potential, positive things about your life. Most everybody has some positive things going on in their life. Many times when you get in a negative attitude, you can't see the positive things in your life. The only things you can see are the negative things. Well, you need to break out of that and look. There's a lot of positive things going on in almost everybody's life. So just focus on the positive, focus on the potential, focus on where you want to go and how you're going to get there.
Tom, you said this once about wallowing in gratitude, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's the exact opposite of wallowing in self-pity. Wallowing in self-pity, oh no, look at all these terrible things, I'm a little bit of nothing, how can I ever succeed? That's wallowing in self-pity. And that will not only bring you down, but keep you down. That will keep you, securely tied to the bottom of existence, And the opposite of that is wallowing in gratitude. Wow, look at all the things I have to be thankful for. I say it's cold outside and I'm nice and warm. I've got food in the refrigerator I can eat. I have friends. My mother still loves me. Whatever you can think of. My dog loves me. I have things that work in my life, and you just go over everything positive you can think of and say, well, some people don't even have that, don't have as much as I have. And, I need to appreciate all these things that I have. And if you think about it a while, the list of positive things in your life will get longer and longer. And yeah, wallowing in gratitude is the antidote to wallowing in negativity, wallowing in self-pity.
I love that. I have so much fun doing that. It really connected when you said that whole concept.